Women on a Green Mission. Follow along as two friends document their unfurling permaculture journeys.
Join our chats each week where we'll be sharing how we and others apply permaculture to our gardens and daily life.
We're no experts. We're at the start of our journey, fumbling our way to a greener life. We love your company along the way.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to our next season.
Woohoo! Season, what are we up to? Season 4.
Season 4, yes.
Season 4, yeah, I had to think about that. I'm like, are we there already?
Well, I'm planning season 5 already, so I was about to say 5, but no, it's season 4.
Look, it takes a lot, doesn't it? Like, and this is something I want to acknowledge again, like the amount of work that you specifically put into this podcast in the back end of like arranging interviews and putting it all together and just, doing the research and, like you are the best pod wife ever. I just show up. When I'm told. Like, honestly, you do so much. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's lovely. Yeah, no, we've got some good guests this season. We got Brett coming back to talk about project management on homesteads, which I think a lot of people get some good knowledge out of. Who else have we got coming on? We've got Nikki, hopefully, his wife, coming closer to December. We haven't locked that in.
We're really excited to talk to Nikki.
Yes. She'll be talking about homesteading and cooking and preserving and like those kinds of things. We've got a few authors this season too. Manda Scott. So she wrote a really cool book that Joe and I both listened to on audio. But not just that, she's actually got a podcast that goes with it and all these resources because she's very passionate about kind of future casting where the world's going and how, like, what we can do to fix it. Because she's quite concerned about the state of the world. So she's got some amazing resources and she'll be really interesting to listen to. We've got a farmer coming on, another author. We've got a journalist coming on to talk about what she's doing and how she's slowing her life down. So, we've got some really interesting people.
I love it. It's so, each season from one to the next has been so diverse in, the different people. Like when we started this, be like, yeah, cool, we'll talk to people about permaculture, but it just goes so much deeper and broader than, I don't want to say just permaculture, but like it just demonstrates though that you don't necessarily need to be a, air quotes here, permaculturalist to, practice the ethics and the principles and have that integrated throughout what your life's purpose is and who you are as a person. And I think, this podcast has been just a great demonstration of that and continues to be. I love
we've got a lot more
hearing it.
Urban people this season too, so that's interesting because I think a lot of people think, I don't have property so I can't do permaculture, because I think permaculture is so strongly embedded still in gardening. And even my friends, I've come back to Newcastle and they're like, so how's your permaculture garden going? And everybody does think it is about gardening. And so I think it's nice to kind of broaden people's eyes up to what else it can be and how it can be applied to business and how it can be applied to all different aspects of your life.
Absolutely. So I suppose, I want to know, like, now that we've got, like the big stuff out of the way, how's your week? What's been happening?
Yes, good actually. So we're in Newcastle. We're pre-recording this because we obviously want to get organised for the season ahead. So we're about to do the Living Smart Festival this weekend and I'm here for that. But it's just been nice seeing family and friends that are here in Newcastle. We haven't seen them for probably about six months or so was the last time we came back down here. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind trip because we're trying to pack everybody in, do all the things. I've had a lot of work this week and a lot of prep for the weekend, but we've squeezed in a trip to the community gardens. That was really nice to go back there and see that as well. Yeah,
has much changed like since you were there? Has there been a lot that's happened?
Yeah, there's a bit more infrastructure going in, but the gardens are looking, I don't know if it's because it's between season, but they're looking a bit bare and a bit weedy, whether they're just kind of letting them go to do chop and drop. Like, I don't know the context behind what's going on there, but it's nice. It's nice to go back and just see it, and the kids were so excited to be there, and there's some fennel growing and lots of broad beans, and strawberries all starting to go red. So yeah, it was nice to kind of see that.
Oh,
Um,
beautiful.
but yeah, it's just been one of those weeks of peopling and work this week. Not a lot of gardening because we're not home, but I'll be interested to see how our irrigation goes because I set up irrigation while we were away or
Okay,
before we
yeah, you
were
got that
away
finished.
for
Yep.
yeah for while we're away, and my neighbor just checking in on it for me in case like a pipe bursts or something like that because we haven't really tested it properly. And she said, "It's okay. You've passed your plumbing apprenticeship. It's all good." I said, "Good. I need a pay rise then." I need a pay rise if I've passed. So apparently it's held up. So I'm
Good.
interested to see what the plants actually look like. And yeah, I didn't really plan how much, like, I wasn't really thinking about how much water they'd need. I kind of guesstimated. I was like, oh, yeah, the drippers can be on for an hour and a half. I'm like, oh, is that too long? Is it not enough? So we'll see how they've all reacted. I
Yeah,
think it's been
good
pretty mild
experiment.
weather. Yeah, I think it's been pretty mild weather. Like, I don't think it's been too hot, but I know it has been quite windy before we
Mm.
left. So I'm hoping the soil hasn't dried out. Tried to mulch everything as much as I could before we left. So yeah, that'll be interesting next week going back home and seeing how everything's held up and reacted to the water and the system we put in place.
So are you feeding this from mains or from tank?
Mains
From
at the
mains,
moment. We
okay.
don't have any tanks until we have roofs. So
Yep.
Um, yeah, that's why I was worried about the pressure as well, that it would like burst because I've just
Too
left the
much,
taps
yeah.
on, but the timer's dictating when it
Yep.
turns on and off. I was like, oh, when the timer switches off, is it just going to build up pressure and burst? So I was a bit worried, but apparently it's held up. And the other thing I didn't think about, I was like, oh, all of the other part of the garden is on our septic water reticulation, like it gets treated
Mm-hmm.
and Oscar's like, yeah, but we're not flushing the toilet or doing loads of washing, so water's not going to be filling up to be used in the system. And I
So
was
once
like,
it's yeah, once it's
I didn't
actually
think
gone
about
through
that.
its first cycle, if it's not being topped up, it won't do
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. So we had to lay quickly before we left, like one of those soaker hoses on
Mm-hmm.
that side of the hedge just to make sure it gets enough water. So hopefully that was on long enough as well because that was a very last minute addition to the setup.
Well, hopefully you've got enough water, storage in the ground because, you've looked after it and you've mulched that you
Mm,
won't, it won't lose too much. And I know, look, I think the winds sometimes are, 10 times worse than, the direct sun when it comes to drying because it just sucks the life out of, every little bit of moisture in that
mm,
topsoil. So, but if you've done all of those things, hopefully that water retention that
mm.
you've got in the soil already will be
Yeah.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting because I put some before we left some of those worm towers, the homemade worm towers with just the
Yeah.
PVC pipe and a cap. And I had to dig the hole next to the mango tree and the other trees I put them near to bury them. And I should take a photo when I get home. Like our ground is like concrete everywhere else. Like the kids fall over and they skin their whole knee. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's how hard and abrasive the soil is where it's not planted out. And then you dig, I was digging these worm towers in and it's just so like cool and wet and there's worms and it's just so nice to see that what we've done's made a difference already and it's working compared to the soil that's literally 10 centimeters away,
Yeah.
that's
It's just
completely
rock hard.
dry, cracked. Yeah, and it's literally like concrete. Like the kids hate playing on it because it's just so hard. And because it's all uneven, they're tripping over frequently and
Mm-hmm.
they're kind of not enjoying all the hard dirt everywhere. But yeah, so that's really nice to see that it's made a difference and what a big impact a bit of mulch and organic matter can have in a short period of time.
It is amazing, isn't it, to see that? Like we've
Mm,
got the same. We've got sections here where, yeah, if you've fall over, you're going to skin your knee. It's going to be,
mm,
um, you're going to know about it. We've
yeah.
got other sections that we've improved, and some that we've intentionally improved. Like we have mulched and we've put compost down and we have done all the right things. And there's other areas where it's been like a little bit of a dumping ground for
Mm,
like big branches and things like, oh yeah, we'll get to that later. And you look under there and the life that's under there.
That's cool,
is
hey?
amazing. So I love seeing that as well, where it's like these
Mm.
unintentional improvements because Mother Nature's just gone. Well, there's a branch there, or there's a pile of leaves, or there's a log, or even some of our project material that we've got laying around because. We've got several projects on the go, and sometimes we just have a little pile of material for that particular project that we're going to come back to. And,
Mhm.
because you've got a little bit of cover on the ground,
Yeah.
it just creates this little tiny, its own little, microclimate and its own little ecosystem
Yeah.
under there. And I love seeing that.
I guess
Um,
that goes back to
yeah.
slow and small solutions. Like, you don't have to do a lot to have a big
Yeah.
impact, really.
Yep. Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Well, we've
Yeah,
had a
you
fun week.
guys.
We've been the same. It's been hectic with work. So yeah,
Mm.
lots of longer days and just trying to cram a heap of stuff in, which is good. Like it's good and it's different work and challenging work.
Mhm.
But we've had the turkeys have been fighting. Our boys have been blueing
Oh,
because it's
no.
spring, and even though they don't have a girl to fight over, they
Ah.
have a fantasy for or fetish for crocs. So we've got our, daggy old farm crocs that sit out at the back door. And of course, the other day, one decided he had to mate the croc, and then the other one took exception to that. So then it was on for young and old. So yeah,
That
we
is
feel like a
so
little bit of a
funny.
ringmaster sometimes. Kind of, we've got to separate them out. Someone gets locked up in the coop, and the other one gets locked in the house paddock. And sometimes we just sort of let them go without, like, they do injure themselves, but it's not critical
Bad.
injuries or anything like that. Like
Yeah.
it's a bit of bruising, and they sort of feel sore and sorry for themselves. So if we can kind of get them to that point where one of them goes, yeah, okay, I'm going to give in,
Tapping out.
then they're fine. They're typical blokes though, like you know,
Oh, God.
they fight over a girl or a croc in this case. Hate each other. It's on for young and old, and then half an hour later, yeah, we're all tired. Let's just go and lay in the sun together and fall asleep. Like
That's so funny.
we're best mates again. Let's just get on with it. So yeah, so we've had that going on. The
Yeah.
ducks have been laying eggs like
Oh.
crazy, and no one's sitting. I'm like up there every day going, come on, one of you girls, like
Um,
just one of you get the urge, get clucky, come and sit because we don't have an incubator, and I don't want to get an incubator and then have to hand raise as much as I'd love to, because I'd love to have, very tame ducks. Our ducks tolerate us being near them.
mhm.
I just don't have the time for that. And I don't have the equipment. I don't want to invest in that at this stage. So, yeah, I was hoping that once we sort of got to a clutch of about sort of that 10 to 12 eggs, that someone would get inspired to sit.
Nothing.
I have to go and clean the eggs out. We're up to about 25 eggs in the clutch at the moment out there, and no one's sitting there,
Um,
just dropping eggs wherever.
wow.
So yeah, I don't think we're going to get any babies this year unless we decide to incubate, but I don't want to. Um,
Because how long can they
yeah.
sit there for before they need someone on them?
I don't know the exact time, but I know that how it generally works is that, like they'll lay an egg a day or every other
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
And then once they've got a clutch size that they're happy with, and that's usually, anywhere from that sort of 10, maybe 10 to 15 is what I've read. Our
Mhm.
girl sat last time on, so we ended up with 6 babies, and we had 3 that weren't viable. So she sat on 9,
Yeah, okay.
and so that was enough for her. And yeah, so I don't know why 25 isn't enough for them. And I'm like, how do I get them inspired? So someone knows. I mean, by the time you're listening to this, it'll be well past the stage of having babies, but maybe for next season, if anyone has any tips on
Yeah.
how to get your ducks to want to sit and incubate their own eggs, I would appreciate the advice.
Yeah. Sorry, I got nothing.
You're no
I
good
got
to me,
nothing.
Elise. Oh my goodness.
Soz.
But they're still funny. Like, if we get babies, great. I want to be able to share
Mm.
them out as well. Like, there's, um, Chris from, oh, what's his property called? I can't think of what it is. Anyway, Chris,
Chris we
he's
interviewed.
so no, I met Chris at Permaculture at the pub, so I've promised him
Uh,
some babies as well. Yeah, when we get some, but I don't know if we're going to get any this year. But we'll see.
uh,
We'll see how we go. So, what are we talking about? today for season one, for season four, episode one.
We've been brainstorming about what to talk about. And there was a moment in one of our past episodes that I think it was either Will or Anthea, but when we were chatting to them, one of them said that they've toyed, or maybe it was like an off the cuff comment, but they said, why don't we take a break in summer
Mm.
from our gardens? Because in winter over in Europe, obviously um, they don't plant all the way through. They're still harvesting from their gardens, but they're not actively in their gardens because of the snow and the weather and the climate and the cold. And they made a comment about, why do we push through our summer and work so hard? And I think it's particularly, maybe not for some of our more southern states, but we're up where I am in a subtropical climate, and even further north of where I am and
Mm-hmm.
inland, I know that there's varieties that are more suited to the subtropics, but even then, you're kind of battling the elements similar to what they do in winter over in Europe. And, you're fighting the heat, you're fighting pests and diseases because your plants are suffering and they're not in
Mm-hmm.
optimum health. You're got a lot of water resources that get
Mm-hmm.
invested into your garden. So I thought it would just be interesting to kind of do a little thought experiment about, should we garden in summer? What considerations are there? Can we scale back? Like what could an alternate summer look like in our gardens when we're having those crazy summer hot periods in Australia?
Mm. And I think too with that, it does depend on context as well. So not just
Totally.
necessarily your climate, but also your garden. Like I was thinking when you were saying that, my garden, which is really exposed, like, and it bakes in summer because I don't have a lot of established trees, deciduous trees that give that shaded protection. I got some shade cloth and
Mm.
things like that up, but that's not the same as having um, that shade from trees up, so that it's giving you that wind protection, it's giving you that sun protection right when you need it in the
Mm.
late afternoon.
Yeah, and those trees are transpiring like through their leaves, so they're
That's
creating that
right.
microclimate. It's not just shade they're providing.
Exactly. So there's a
Yeah.
lot cooler under there. So I'm looking at my context versus like limestone, like because we
Hmm.
spoke to Brett the other day, thinking about his garden and the way it's completely protected and shaded, and the results that he would get.
Yes.
Purely, based on how his garden is set up and how mature it
Yeah.
is. So yeah, there's a lot
Mm.
of different factors. But you know what? It's so true. Look, we've had summers here where we have just been like it's it's crazy. Like we've got multiple days, sometimes weeks of 40 plus degrees. And I'm
Mm.
out there trying to water plants. And I'm like, why am I
Or
doing this? Like we're
mulch.
having to get
Yeah.
water trucked in because we haven't had any rain. And I'm like, what? This is futile. But yet I've still done it because there's still been this part of me that
Mm.
says, well, I've got to have a garden. I've got to have something growing. I've got to be able to harvest something at the end of all of this. Or I've
Yeah,
put the
yeah.
effort and the money into investing into seeds and seedlings and compost, and I've put my resources into it, so I've got to keep that going. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it is futile when it's like that. It's
Yeah.
like, just give up.
Yeah. Well, I was
I don't want
reading.
to say just give up, but yeah,
Yeah,
you've
yeah,
you've
yeah.
really got to consider, yeah, is this worth it? And then, not to mention that, and this is something that you highlighted for me the other day. Like we were barely into spring, and you and I
Mm.
jumped on, and you're like, oh my god, I'm just sweating, like I've just been outside, and this was like 8 o'clock in the morning, and it was
Mm.
super hot, and you're like, I don't know how long I'm going to be able to keep doing this. Like I'm going to be getting up at 3 a.m. to do all my chores
The
because
garden. Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to be out there past 7, 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. Well, I was doing a bit of reading and research, like around what other people think and their opinions. And there's one lady, her blog's called Love of Dirt, and she's up in the
Mm.
subtropics. So her thing is all about subtropical and, more equatorial kind of areas. But her big tip is to like scale back, but not just that. Like you were saying, you want something in the ground still. So she does cover crops for summer. So
Yep.
her summer period is a cover crop time, and she just does a lot of cover crops. And I thought that's really smart in terms of replenishing your soil, obviously
Mm.
covering it too so it's not going to dry out and you're starting from scratch, come autumn. But yeah, you've still got stuff in the ground and you can kind of still, and I think she still grows in between her cover crops too. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting kind of take on it, to just do lots of cover cropping and soil amendments during summer.
It's a great way to do it. And then being, yeah,
Mm,
really selective about what you want to grow, like choosing those things
yeah.
that love the heat and love that direct sun. Like if that's what you've got, plant your
Hmm.
sunflowers, plant your corn. Plant things that are going to really thrive in that environment, and then that way your resources are being used on those select things that you're going to
Hmm.
get a good harvest out of. Rather than
Yeah.
trying to yeah,
Yeah.
battle through with things that are going to bolt or wilt or
Mm.
just, get munched. Yep.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think focusing more on long-term crops, like planting things like sweet potato and beetroot, that's kind of like a set and forget crop that you're
Mm-hmm.
not sowing during summer. So you're still gardening, but you're not necessarily planting stuff out because, like you said, your lettuce is going to bolt, coriander, like lots of herbs are just going to go to flower and
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to get any longevity out of them. So thinking more about long-term crops that you could be planting.
And then even with those, looking at going, well, I still want to grow lettuce, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just grow them in a pot and I'm going to put them,
Hmm.
in a shaded area or something like that. I'm going to, put that pot under a particular tree near a pond or under my veranda or grow it on the
Mhm, mhm.
windowsill that doesn't get direct sunlight or, whatever that looks like. So you're still being able to grow, a little bit of what you need,
Yeah.
but yeah, you're not battling the elements. You're just being quite selective.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
love that.
Or even like, I know it's harder to get to, but if you're doing your cucumbers and things that you put them in a trellis, it's like a triangle because then it creates that shade and you can plant it underneath it. So it's hard to harvest and get to depending how you trellis it. But at least they're going to have full shade underneath there or your lettuces because you're growing them underneath cucumbers and things like that.
Well, see,
So
that's where
like you
having small
said,
children helps. You send them in.
yes.
Go and get the lettuce, kids. In you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, like you said, you can have things like, deciduous trees that are going to provide lots of shade for your summer crops. And then
Mm-hmm.
you'll have the leaves fall so they get the winter sun. But it could be years before those things are established if you're just starting out a garden like I am. Or you've got allelopathic trees like I have, like all the eucalypts that I can't grow under, even though it's nice and shady, because it's just going to take all the water and nutrients out of the soil unless I'm really kind of clever about it. So, even if you do have trees and it's shady, it still can limit
Mm-hmm.
what you plant. So,
And so
yeah,
this
it's
is
interesting.
where too that planning, that design aspect comes into
Mm-hmm.
it. So you're going, all right, well, I know I can't put an in-ground garden bed, or even maybe a raised garden bed underneath my gum trees, but I can do a wicking bed. And I
Yeah.
know that that's going to be, maybe I might not grow anything in winter in there. I might
Mm-hmm.
grow some biomass or something like that, but in summer that's going to be my spot where you can grow those things that wouldn't necessarily thrive in the ground in your bed as well. So because that's something that we're
Mm-mm.
looking at too. Because I've planted some mulberry trees on the western side of where that new garden bed's going to go,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're only little, but eventually they won't be little, and they will be nice and big, and they'll provide that afternoon shade.
Mm.
But until then, yeah, I'm looking at okay, where can I put some wicking beds so that I
Yeah.
can still grow throughout the summer, and get those harvests without having to worry about say what
Yeah.
if we're on tank water here and I don't want to have
Yeah.
to purchase town water because I don't want
Mm.
chlorinated water in my tanks. Like that's my main
Mm.
reason. I don't like, if we have to, we have to, right? But I really
Yeah.
want to, not have to do that. So we're going to be putting more tanks in and we're putting more water storage in. But one way of doing that is, yeah, from a wicking bed perspective, where
Yeah,
I
I
can
never
I can
thought of
fill it up
that.
and I don't have to think about it for a week or two.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I actually hadn't thought about doing that because that would really help. And like you said, planning comes into it so much. Like if you're stacking function and integrating things, then you will have pockets of shade. Like you will have those opportunities for planting, whether it's, on a southern side of a wall somewhere or underneath a vine or a climber like we were talking
Mm.
about. Madagascar beans are really good for that, to create like a trellis or an arch, and then you can have, things growing under that. So there's lots of opportunities. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying abandon your garden in summer, but I just think it's a really interesting exercise to think about it and to question the norm. That's what I think is really exciting about these conversations. Like,
Yeah.
we do it because everyone does it, but if we question it, what does that mean? What does it look like? What could we change? What considerations are there?
And it's almost like we're giving each other and ourselves permission to
Yes.
not have to do something, because, and not that
Yeah.
not that we should, like, I don't want that to be misconstrued,
Yes.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
need, I need to have a conversation, or someone needs to tell me it's okay not to do something. But
Yeah.
we really do heap a lot of these expectations on ourselves from what society's norms are, or what we've interpreted as what we need to do. And it's
Mm-hmm.
only when we have these sort of conversations that all of a sudden we go, huh. Like you said, like
Mm-hmm.
and I think it was Anthea that actually mentioned it in one of our interviews, and because I know afterwards, like you said to me, that's, yeah, really, I hadn't really thought
It's
about
just
that before. It was
been
just
on
that
my
thing.
mind. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been on my mind for a really long time. And I was like, I just want to unpack it a little bit and talk about it and get my verbal diarrhea out of my head and out there.
Blah, blah, blah. But it's,
Blech.
it's, yeah, again, it changes the paradigm. It changes the way we're
Mm,
actually seeing our situation and going, okay, well, how else can I tackle this? And you don't know what you don't know, right? So this is why these
yeah.
conversations are so good. I mean, it certainly changed how I'm going to be approaching summer. I'm certainly not
Mm,
going to be battling through on those exposed areas. I am going to be putting cover crops in,
mm-hmm.
and sunflowers. I've got a couple of kilos of sunflower seeds to put in. So, um,
Mm,
I'm going to be utilizing those spaces. I still want roots in the ground. I still want those spaces to be covered. And
yeah.
some of the areas I may just very well let the chickens in, and you know what, you can go hammer and tong, girls, and
Yeah.
have fun in there. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not going to be battling through. Whereas, yeah, years gone by, I
Mm.
certainly have. Yeah.
And you touched on it before. You were like, I don't want to be in my garden slugging out. I guess it kind of also comes to that lifestyle thing. So
Mm.
for me as well, the other side of the coin is like in spring, I am in my garden and I'm prepping so much and there's so much to do. And for us, summer's like a break. Like summer, Oscar's got lots of public holidays. He's not working. We go see family come up. We're at the beach all the time. We've got events, it's the silly season, like all that
Yeah.
coincides with summer in Australia where we have these commitments. School holidays, if you have kids at school, they're now at home. There's all these extra things that happen during summer. And I think to just give yourself a little bit more grace, but
Mm-hmm.
also just think about your lifestyle. Like, what do you want for that season of the year in your life? And for me, it's to be at the beach. Like, we want to be at the beach in the morning, and if I have to commit to gardening in the morning because it's too hot in the middle of the day, if I'm at the beach till, 9, 10 o'clock, I get home and it's
Mm.
way too hot to garden. And then the afternoon I'm getting smashed by mozzies. So
It's not
if I want
enjoyable.
to, yeah, if I want to design my life and in that permaculture lens, and I'm coming back to my why and what I'm doing and why I want to be doing what I'm doing, I want to be enjoying the time I have in the location we've chosen to live, which
Mm-hmm.
means going to the beach, which means being social. So for us, I want summer to be more about that as much as possible, and set up a low maintenance garden for summer with long-term crops, with cover crops, with wicking beds. Now I'm thinking about that more and more. But those kinds of things in our system, and design not just our garden, but design our life
Mm-hmm.
around decision making that will support that we're living the way we want to be living, and not just being a slave to whatever we've subscribed to, actually being really intentional and thinking about, well, what is it that I want to get out of this period of my life or this season of the year?
I love that. So it got me thinking about, um, from that ethics perspective, the earth care, people care, and the fair share. With that people care
Mm,
and having those different times in your life and different seasons, like there are those busy periods throughout the year where you are
mm,
more peoply. Like,
Mhm.
there's Christmas and different holidays and things like that. But there's also then opportunity if you're not, feeling that you have to be at home battling in the garden, trying to get everything going. It gives you more
Yeah.
space to be able to extend into community more and give more of yourself into community and get that connection. So you're actually getting something else, and being able to give something else throughout this.
Mhm.
I'll call it a season. Like, I'm not necessarily talking about, summer, autumn, winter, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
those different
That
seasons
period.
within the
Yeah.
cycle and within your life, and being
Mm.
able to extend that way, and
Yeah.
being able, like, again, to give and receive of yourself, rather than focusing on something that just frustrates the hell out of you. You crack the shits and throw your hands in the air.
Yeah. And just like the feeling of just not having all your balls in the air and struggling because you're like, oh, I've still got to go out and do this in the garden, or I've still got to mulch again because it's getting hot, and adding things to the to-do
Mm.
list unnecessarily.
Yeah, and being in that overwhelm. And again, that's a societal pressure too, isn't it? And again,
Mm-hmm.
it depends on how you look at it. But, what do we say when someone says, how have you been? Oh, I've been really busy. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
I know we've had this conversation before, but,
Mm.
we don't have to be. We can say, well, yeah, summer is a time of rest and relaxation and rejuvenation and fun. And yeah, it doesn't have to be busy. It can just be,
Mm-hmm.
you can just be. Just be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, so interesting. And I'd like to hear how other people as well are like thinking about their garden in summer, because this is the first year we've been gardening in the subtropics. So I'm starting to do a lot more research about things like powdery mildew, because we'll still have a lot of
Mm-hmm.
wets, even though it's hot as well. So we get a lot of humidity. And so, yeah, I'm just interested other people's thoughts about this. Obviously, if you're down in Tassie, you're like, yay, I can finally garden. But up here,
Yeah.
it's a different story.
But I mean, again, that's the context thing, isn't it? Like, you've got then the flip side, especially, if you've got someone at altitude who receives, a frost pretty much every day, throughout
Hmm.
winter and on the shoulders as well, or, they're getting snow, then they've got, the same as, how a lot of people in Europe deal with,
Hmm.
their gardens as well. So they've just got
In
the flip
winter.
side. So it doesn't really matter whether
Yeah.
it's too hot or it's too cold or too wet or too snowy or dry or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, there's always that period of extreme at either
Yeah.
end, and it's then how we utilize everything else in the middle to our
Yeah.
advantage and our situation. Yeah.
And that's the other thing after talking to Brett as well for his episode that's getting released next week, is that summer is a glut. Like, you always get that summer glut. So if I'm
Mm-hmm.
out in the garden all the time, when the hell am I going to have time to process my tomatoes? When am I going to preserve all my cucumbers or
Yes.
my zucchinis? Like, it's also factoring in that, because with summer comes that massive glut that you're wanting to preserve and harvest for the rest of the year out of your cupboard. So if I've got all these commitments in the garden as well, then how do I factor in processing all the food that I'm getting out? That's the
Brilliant
other thing
point.
I've really been
Yep.
thinking about. Like, so much of your time towards the end of summer is harvesting and processing from
Yep.
stuff you've planted, early summer, late spring. So you're not planting it during summer, but then you're having to actually deal with it. So if you're also gardening and processing, like, I just think it's one of those extra things, and it's hard to manage it all. So, yeah,
And
maybe we
it,
focus more on that in summer than the actual gardening side, and focusing on that homesteading aspect of, your yield.
and this is where planning is so important, and
Mm,
understanding the resources that you'll need, the time that you'll need. Like, I know when I first started preserving, I don't do nearly as much preserving as what I'd like to. Um,
mm,
but when I first started, I didn't understand how time intensive it was. So the preparation of your equipment, sterilizing your
yeah.
jars and your lids, and making sure that you've got the time to be able to do that. And then you've got the preparation of the
Yeah.
food, and then you've got the actual, whether you've got to cook it first or whether you're making your syrups, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And then the preservation, and then it's the cooling, and then the storage, and making sure that you're prepared for that. I mean, the amount of times that my dining table was like full, like I've got jams and I've got preserved fruits and I've got sauces and I've got all of these things, and my pantry, I've got nowhere. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've literally got jars still, like in the cupboard in the spare room. I've got them um, under the bed. I've got them,
Yeah.
everywhere. So because I
Yeah.
just didn't
Yeah.
have the room, because I didn't plan for that.
Yeah.
So this all takes time and energy and effort. And yeah, and if that's a much better way to use your time and energy, if that's something that you're wanting to do, rather than battling the elements. Like
Mm-mm.
really, yeah, I love
Yeah.
that point, Elise. That's really good.
Yeah, just plant your key crops that you want in and then forego the rest of it. Like I said, really scale back what you might be planting in variety and just go, okay, I'm going to focus on these 5 things so I
Mm-hmm.
can get a bumper crop because I'm going to harvest and preserve those and forget about the other stuff. That
And
time you
maybe
got all your
connect.
garlic, all your
Yeah.
garlic's coming out, you're getting all that out, you're cleaning it, you're drying it, you're braiding. Like there's just so many crops that at that time of the year have a lot of effort. And the cleaning, like after doing it all, like when I do my zucchinis, they soak in salt water in salt overnight, and then you process them, but then all the cleaning up of all the
Mm.
gear and washing, and especially with little kids, like there's times where I've put the zucchinis in salt and then the next day just gone, oh, we're having a shit fight of a day, like am I even going to get these in a jar?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. You're
So
like, yeah,
yeah.
just got to try and battle that through and go, okay, where can I
Mm.
find that time to be able to do that? Or, how am I going to best manage this? So that's where you, again, get the kids onto it. Come on, kids. We're
Giddy
preserving. Up
up.
you get on the bench.
Pull your weight.
Oh. But see, this is too, I think, talking about focusing on those key crops that you can actually, put in, and you're going to have a level of success with, is then connecting
Mm.
with other people. This is where, again, the community comes into it, is
Yes. Yeah.
who can you connect with who might be growing something that you are just not going to have success with all the time for over
Yeah.
summer, that you can say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, listen, if I grow this and I give you some of this, can you grow an extra few of those, and you can give me some of those? And that little bit of extra planning
Mm-hmm.
means that you can still extend what you're actually able to receive, if what you're going to
Yeah.
utilize, but you're not necessarily being the one responsible for growing it. I think if more of us do that type of thing, I mean, we always want to have, like, we don't want, monoculture, we don't want monocrops, but
Mm-hmm.
if there's more of that type of thing where I'm really good at growing, like, yeah, I'm always going to have zucchinis. My pumpkins are going to thrive. Corn's going to be amazing. But I always have, a bit of a hard time with tomatoes, for example. Okay,
Yeah.
well, yeah, who locally absolutely just, loves growing tomatoes and is amazing at it, and who can I
Mm.
swap with?
Mm.
What do they need that I could potentially grow? Do they not have the room for pumpkins? So I'm going to grow their pumpkins and melons, and they're going to give me,
Mm-mm.
some tomatoes. So, yeah, again, it's just being innovative, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, totally. Oh, good. Is there anything else you want to kind of chat about with our summer gardens?
Um, I think maybe just touching on water.
Mm-hmm.
This is something, and I'd love it if someone could maybe explain this to me. I'm a little bit blue in this area.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand the reason why people would use a drip irrigation line or soaker hoses, so it's down low. It's water
Yeah.
preservation, because that water's soaking straight into the soil. It's not being evaporated, right? So it's going straight into the soil.
Yeah.
Um, I, not from a water usage perspective, but just from, I don't know how I feel about it. I like
Mm.
overhead watering, because I feel that it's more of a natural way. It mimics the rain, especially if it's coming from tank water, like it's, rainwater just
Yeah.
being redistributed.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that, yeah, that it mimics natural rainfall better than
Yeah.
using, say, a
Yeah.
soaker. And don't get me wrong, I've got soaker hoses all through the gardens as
Yeah.
well, and drip irrigation and whatever.
Mhm.
But there's these polarizing views on no, you can't do any overhead watering because you're going to end up with
Yeah. I think
powdery
that's all
mildew. You're going to end
bullshit.
up with diseases. You're going to
Yeah.
end up with this and that and the other. And
For
I've never
me,
really seen a difference. If anything, overhead
yeah.
watering's been better for us because we
Yeah.
get a more even soakage.
Yeah.
And especially, I mean, if you've got seedlings and you need to overhead water because unless you've got a soaker drip or a drip hose that's going to be delivering it
Yeah.
right to that seedling, having it 10 centimeters away isn't going to work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's your take on that? And I'd love to hear other
I
people's
think
takes on that too.
there's a few things that kind of come to mind when you talk about that. For me, it's like a redundancy method. So you've got
Mm-hmm.
the option of it there if you do need it. Obviously, it's expensive to kind of put these things in. I think it depends on your time too. Like if you're going to go out there and overhead water in the middle of the day and it's going to burn the leaves, then maybe, you're going to rely on your drip irrigation more so because, you might need to go to work really early so you can't get out there and water them. So I think it's a context thing more than anything, like people's
Mm.
preferences. And I think no matter what you choose, you're going to find data out there to support it these days because of the wild
Yeah,
west of the
that's true,
internet.
isn't it?
So,
Yeah.
you're going to find yes and no arguments for both.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, it's redundancy. I think it's contextual. I think it's, yeah, how much effort you're willing to go out and, place in your garden. I think it depends on the type of plant too, like whether, some plants are going to like that overhead watering, some aren't. I think, yeah, water saving, like for a lot of people, it comes down to that, like being able to do it. But also, Matt and Lentil in their book, I can't remember which one of their books that they talk about plants. The fact that they're having a little bit often can often be, they believe, better for them to get their
Mm-hmm.
exact water requirements rather than having a whole dump of water once. But then you also have that school of thought of, you do it once and they get deep roots. So I think, yeah, no matter what you choose, there's probably evidence to support it. But I think mainly it comes down to convenience and context and what your ability is to be out there watering your
Yeah.
garden more than anything.
Because I mean, yeah, we've got a
For
combination of
me,
like, yeah, soaker hoses, we've got drip
yeah,
irrigation. And like when I say soaker hoses, I don't mean the black soaker, I mean like the old school play under the hose kind of soaker hose, the green with the holes that ends
oh
up
yeah,
being an
yeah,
overhead watering system anyway. And
hmm,
we've got various water saving sprinklers.
yeah,
And yeah, and I don't know, maybe it's an aesthetic thing for me as well. Like when I am watering, and I
yeah,
usually water, it's either first thing in the morning or late in the afternoon. Again, that's a whole other school of thought of watering late in the
yeah.
afternoon. That's a big no. Apparently, I've never had issues. Um, but yeah, I think it's maybe just an aesthetic thing too, or something that's just kind of pleasing to see the plants being like actually seeing the water.
Watered. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe
And I
maybe
think it's a
that's the thing too.
seasonal thing. Like I don't really
Yeah,
rely on my soaker hoses and dripper in winter, but I do heavily rely on it in the warmer months because I
yeah.
know that it'll come on at 6 o'clock before I even get out of bed. They're watered, and then I can just give them a top up in between. Whereas in winter, they're off, like they don't even come on at all. And I actually really enjoy being out there watering, and there's less to do in winter. So I have the
Mm.
capacity to be out there watering and observe and think and ponder. Whereas in summer,
And you're
yeah, I'd
select
rather
watering
be,
then at that point, aren't you? Like it's just what's
yeah,
needed.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then in summer, I think I'd rather be committing my time to other stuff in the garden than watering, and I often can't get out there early enough to be able to do it. So, yeah, I think it's seasonal and contextual mainly. Why, in my mind, why people choose to do it
Mm.
in a certain way. But yeah, I don't know. It'd be
No.
interesting to see other people's points of view on why they
Yeah.
choose their method.
Because
It's
there's
like that
yes.
meme, that meme with the hose. It's like who uses the mist setting or the,
Yeah,
jet
yeah.
setting? Like everyone uses the rain setting, surely.
It's like, yeah, like what's the one that I've got? It's like, yeah, the full setting where it's like someone's got a mouthful of water and it just goes bleh. It's like, who's using that? Like what do I use that for?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh.
Oh, good. Well, yeah, I'd love to hear what other people are thinking about it. So if you want to drop into the comments in YouTube or in our private chat on Facebook, I'd love to hear different people's
Mm.
opinions based on their context and yeah, what they're doing in their gardens over summer and their thoughts about it all.
And if you're going to change, like I'd love to hear too, like whether this
Yeah, true.
conversation or another conversation, or something that you've read or you've seen has prompted you to change the way you garden in summer, or even just to maybe change your habits in summer, because you've had that paradigm shift. I'd love to hear about that as well.
I'm going to get some wicking beds in now. I just totally didn't even think about that front of the gum trees, but that's a really good option for us.
Yeah, and then that way, you don't have to worry about water.
Yep.
You don't have to worry about the soil around the gum trees. You don't have to worry about disturbing roots. You can even put a little seat in between them and make it a nice little sitting area. How gorgeous would that be?
Watch this space.
Oh, all right. Well, yeah, sunshine
Definitely.
is here, and I'm going to go out and enjoy some of that today. And I will see you
Lovely.
tomorrow at the Living Smart Festival, which by
Yeah.
the time you guys are listening to this would have already happened. So you'll already see all the photos. But thanks for listening, guys.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Permaculture podcast. Jump onto our Facebook group to keep the chat going and to look for any resources that we mentioned on today's show. Look in the show notes.
And if you liked the episode today, then subscribe. Please give us a review and share. And if you didn't, then that's okay. We're sure you'll find the right podcast for you.
Bye.
Bye.